There's a field near my house I've walked through nearly every day for years. It's not remarkable, just an open stretch of grass surrounded by a thin line of trees. It connects the edge of town to a nearby hiking trail, and it's always been quiet, peaceful, until last week. It started with a glimpse of something unusual. As I was walking home from the trail at dusk, I noticed a figure standing near the center of the field. They were far away, just a dark outline against the fading light. I thought it was strange. No one ever hangs out in the field, especially at that time of day. Most people stick to the paths or the main road. The figure didn't move, and after a moment I convinced myself it was just a farmer or someone passing through. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Their posture was stiff, unnatural, like they were frozen in place. The next day, I walked the same route. The figure was still there, standing in the exact same spot, facing the same direction. This time the sun was higher, and I could make out a bit more detail. They were wearing a long, dark coat, even though the weather was mild. Their face was turned away from me, looking toward the trees. "Hey!" I called out, more to see if they'd react than anything else. My voice carried across the empty field, but the figure didn't flinch. They just stood there, eerily still. I watched them for a minute, then continued walking, my pace a little quicker than usual. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Who stands in the middle of a field for hours without moving? I joked to myself that they might be a scarecrow, but the thought didn't comfort me. The next day, I decided to check it out. I'm not normally one to investigate creepy things, but curiosity got the better of me. I headed into the field, walking directly toward the spot where the figure had been standing, but when I got there was no one. Just grass, bending gently in the breeze. I looked around, scanning the area, but it was empty. There weren't even any footprints in the soft dirt, nothing to suggest anyone had been standing there. I told myself it was just my imagination, or maybe someone playing a prank. But as I turned to leave, I noticed something strange. The grass where the figure had been standing was darker, almost black, and seemed flattened in a perfect circle, like it had been burned. That night, I dreamed of the field. In the dream, I was standing where the figure had been, staring at the distant line of trees. Everything was silent. Too silent. Then, slowly, the trees began to move, their branches twisting unnaturally, as though they were reaching for me. I woke up in a cold sweat, my heart pounding. The next morning, I told myself I wouldn't walk through the field again. I'd take the longer route home, stick to the main road. But as the day went on, a strange compulsion pulled me back. It was like the field was calling me, demanding my attention. When I reached the field, the figure was there again. This time, they were closer to the edge of the trees, almost hidden in the shadows. I hesitated, debating whether to keep walking or turn back, but something about them felt different. They were moving now, just slightly, their head tilted as though they were watching me. A chill ran down my spine. I stepped backward, ready to leave. But then they raised their hand. Slowly, deliberately, and pointed toward the trees. I don't know why, but I followed the direction they pointed. It was as though my body moved on its own, ignoring every instinct screaming at me to run. The trees were dense, the shadows deepening as I stepped into the forest. The air was heavy, thick with the scent of damp earth. I didn't see the figure anymore, but I felt them. I felt their presence, watching me, guiding me deeper into the woods. Then, after what felt like hours, I saw it. There was a clearing ahead, and in the center of it, a small wooden structure, a shed, or maybe an old hunting blind. It looked ancient, the wood warped and blackened with age. The door was slightly ajar, revealing nothing but darkness inside. I stopped, every muscle in my body screaming at me to turn back. But before I could move, I heard it. A voice. It was faint, almost a whisper coming from the shed. "Help me?" It sounded like a child, their voice trembling and weak. My heart raced, Every logical part of me knew I shouldn't go any closer, but I couldn't just leave. What if someone was trapped in there? I approached slowly, my hands trembling as I pushed the door open. The inside was pitch black, the air cold and damp. "Hello?" I called out, my voice shaking. "Is someone in there?" The voice came again, clearer this time. "Please, help me." I stepped inside, squinting to see in the darkness. The shed was empty, just a dirt floor and rotting wooden walls. But the voice kept calling, growing louder, echoing around me. Then, the door slammed shut. I spun around, heart pounding, but the door wouldn't budge. I pushed and pulled, panic setting in, but it was as though the wood had fused together. That's when I realized the voice had stopped. The shed was silent. No, not silent. I could hear something, a faint sound, like breathing. Slow, deep breaths, coming from behind me. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. But I felt it. Something was there, standing just inches away, its breath hot against the back of my neck. It didn't say anything. It just stood there, waiting. I don't know how long I stood frozen in that shed, but eventually, the door creaked open on its own. The field was just outside, bathed in moonlight, as if nothing had happened. I ran. I didn't look back, not even once. I haven't gone near the field since, but I see it from my window every night. And now, whenever I look out, the figure is there, standing in the center of the grass, facing my house, watching me, waiting. It began on a cold winter night when I moved into the old house on the edge of town. The place was cheap, far too cheap for its size, but I had chalked it up to my good luck. It had a creaky charm about it, a forgotten elegance from another era. The previous owner, a recluse, had left in haste, leaving behind oddities that only added to the house's peculiar allure. The first few days were uneventful. I spent my time unpacking and making the space my own. But at night, the silence was suffocating. There was an oppressive stillness that clung to the air, as if the house itself were holding its breath. And then the whispers began. At first I thought it was the wind. The house was old, after all, and drafts were inevitable. But these whispers were distinct. They carried an unsettling cadence, like secrets being exchanged in the dark. I remember the first night I truly heard them. I was lying in bed, half asleep, when I felt it, the unmistakable sensation of being watched. My eyes snapped open, and I scanned the room, but nothing was there. That's when I heard it, a soft, raspy whisper coming from the corner of the room. I froze, my heart pounding so loudly I thought it would burst. "Who's there?" I managed to croak, my voice barely a whisper itself. The only response was silence. I sat up, trying to convince myself it was my imagination. But deep down, I knew better. The whispers grew bolder in the following nights. They would start faintly, almost imperceptible, but they would grow louder, circling me like a swarm of invisible insects. I began to notice other things too. Shadows that moved where no light could cast them, doors that would creak open on their own, and the distinct feeling of icy fingers brushing against my skin. One night, I decided to confront whatever it was. Armed with nothing but a flashlight, I followed the whispers down to the basement, a place I had avoided since moving in. The air grew colder with each step I took, and the whispers grew louder, more urgent. When I reached the bottom, my flashlight flickered and died. I was plunged into darkness, but the whispers didn't stop. Instead, they seemed to converge around me, forming a cacophony of unintelligible words. And then I saw them. In the dim light filtering through the cracks in the basement walls, I saw shapes. Vaguely human, but wrong. Their eyes glowed faintly, and their mouths moved in unison, though no words escaped. I felt a chill run down my spine as they began to approach. I don't remember how I got out of the basement. One moment I was frozen in terror, and the next I was back in my bedroom, the door locked, and the whispers gone. But the sense of dread never left me. I tried to leave the house the next day, but no matter where I went, I felt their presence. It was as if they had latched onto me, their whispers now a permanent part of my life. I don't sleep much anymore. When I do, I dream of the shadows, their glowing eyes watching me from the darkness. And when I wake, the whispers are there to greet me, a constant reminder that some horrors can't be escaped.